I'd like to announce that today's shir is sponsored by Michael Vogel in memory of Zecher Aharon ben Yirmiyahu Halevi. May Hashem have an aliyah, and thank you very much for the sponsorship. Number two, I'd like to thank the many of you who've come up to me and commented positively about my son's shir in the morning at 9:15. It's tremendous hana for me to hear the remarks, and Bezras Hashem, he should continue to teach many. Okay, today's shir actually is not only one of my favorites, but I think one of the most important shirim that I can give. For those of you who may have heard it before in one of my sessions, don't worry, I've added some bells and whistles as well, but I apologize if some of it is repetition. I learned in yeshiva all my life, from the time that I was in kindergarten through Yeshiva University Smicha. But it wasn't until I sat down and started to learn and learned through the Hakdama, Rambam's Hakdama Leperush HaMishnayos, his introduction to his work explaining the Mishnah. It was only then that I really began to understand oral law and how it works and how it functions and how it really is so pivotal to our existence. I had questions. I mean, if everything's given to Moshe at Sinai, why are there disputes? Why aren't we sure? And this Hakdama really addressed all of those issues. But let's take a look first at the dilemma. Talmud Bavli says, Rav Chia bar Abba, Omar Rav Yochanan, Malamed sheher ohu HaKadosh Baruch Hu LeMoshe, Torah v'dikdusei sofrim, Uma shehasofrim asidim lechadesh, umaynihu mikra Megillah. The Talmud says that Moshe Rabbeinu received entirely all of the details of the Torah, all of oral law, all of the machloksim, all of the differences of opinion that are to develop over the ages. All of this was revealed to Moshe at Sinai. The second quote, even stronger. Vilna, Yikra Rabbah, Mikra, Mishnah, Talmud, Toseftos, Agadot, Va'afilu ma shetalmid Vosik, Osid Lomar Lifnei Rabbo, Kulo Nemru LeMoshe Misinai. All the details that will be learned by all of the Chachamim across the ages, whether it's halacha, whether it's limud, whether it's agada, everything was revealed to Moshe at Sinai, to the point, including even a question that a student will ask his teacher, that was revealed to Moshe at Sinai as well. And that is the text that speaks of the oral law and speaks of its how it is given over the ages. And there are those who take this very literally among the commentaries and among the authorities. If you take a look at the Drashot Haran, the speeches of, or the Drashot of the Ran, Rabbeinu Nisim, Malamed Shero Kadosh Baruch Hu LeMoshe Diktukei Torah v'Diktukei Sofrim Umasha Sofrim Asim Kadesh. Everything was given to Moshe at Sinai, says the Ran. I take the Gemara literally at face value, and therefore you have to understand that all of halacha, all of oral law, was revealed to Moshe at Sinai, and eventually we lost it perhaps over the ages. That's why you have differences of opinion. But that's what the Ran suggests. The Rambam takes a totally different approach. Turn the page. The Rambam, and I have it for you in a paragraph there, believes that when we speak about Moshe receiving the oral law at Sinai, what Moshe received were specific foundations and methods of learning and some laws. We'll talk about that. But the corpus of oral law it was not totally given to Moshe at Sinai, but rather the ways in which it should be applied, the ways in which the Torah should be learned, the ways in which decisions should be made when we are dealing with halacha and changes in circumstance and changes in situation. And the Rambam says that's what it means when we say it was revealed to Moshe at Sinai, that all of the foundations were revealed to him, but not every detail. Not every detail. Certainly not what becomes mandated by rabbis in 1900, 2000, 20,000, whatever it is. You just don't, that was not revealed to Moshe at Sinai. That is a product of the rabbis of our time. And in order to understand, the Rambam says, you have to start by dividing the oral law into its component parts. There are 5 component parts to the oral law, each one with its own rules, each one with its own details. Let's learn them, let's see them. Categories number 1 and 2. The Rambam divides this into 2 categories. Perushim amalkubualim Moshe sheish lam rebez bakosov or efshar lelamdom be'achas hamidos v'zeh ein bo machlokas klal. Says the Rambam, first category, those laws that are given to Moshe, specific laws, or can be learned specifically in the way that Moshe learned and handed down from the text. Halacha Moshe miSinai. That's the phrase. And you find, he says, that when anybody says this is halacha Moshe miSinai, there's no machlokes. That's it. And you find that in the Gemara. You find that in the middle of a machlokes, someone may say, no, that's halacha Moshe miSinai. Finished. That was given to Moshe at Sinai, handed down. Now, this corpus of law, this body of law in this category is not big at all. It's a number of halachot. They include Moshe made the takana that we should read the Torah on Shabbos, other aspects of the liturgy, specifics that were Hashem felt had to be delivered in their entirety to Moshe and handed down. The second corpus, Hadinim shebohem shehem halacha leMoshe miSinai, v'ein alehem raya k'Moshe amarnu. And the second corpus is laws given to Moshe at Sinai that don't even have a hint in the text. And these laws were given to Moshe at Sinai because they were essential, elemental laws that had to be given in their entirety to Moshe. Now, let me give you examples. The first section, for example, says, "Ushartem liosal yodecha v'ayu letotafos beinenecha." Right? You shall bind them to your arms and place them tefillin. What am I supposed to do? Take a whole Sefer Torah? It doesn't tell me what the dvarim are. Halacha leMoshe miSinai. Halacha leMoshe miSinai, that the specific paragraphs in the tefillin should be those paragraphs. Halacha leMoshe miSinai, that the tefillin should be black. You don't see anybody with polka dotted tefillin. The tefillin should be this way. Now, you may say to me, whoa, there's a machlokes, right? There's a difference of opinion between Rashi and the Rabbeinu Tam. The difference of opinion between, and you'll see people sometimes will put on two pairs of tefillin to fulfill both points of view. All of us do Rashi, and then some of us add Rabbeinu Tam. What's the difference between the two? Does anyone know? Not the text, the order of the parshiot. That's it. There's no debate about the text itself. The text itself is Halacha leMoshe miSinai. What there is debate about is the order of the text in the tefillin. Rashi says one way, Rabbeinu Tam says another way, and that's it. But the idea of tefillin and what they should be, that's Halacha leMoshe miSinai. And that's what we call Halacha leMoshe miSinai, which is based on the text, but explaining the text. Kodesh Baruch Hu says to Moshe, when I tell you, this is what I mean. The second section, which are laws given to Moshe that are external to the text, I'll give you one example. What's a tefach? What's an amma? What is the biblical measurements of tefach, the smallest measurement, or an amma? All right, so a tefach is basically what? A fist held like this, that size. And if the law says 10 tefachim, then it's 10 fist sizes of this size, basically. Now, you're going to tell me that your fist may be a different length than my fist, of course. So we have to say the normal fist, and we'll find what that is. The average fist is that X. Same thing with an amma. What's an amma? From your fingertips to your elbow. That's it. All right. What's an amma? That's an amma. And again, it will vary if you measure it or I measure it, but we will come up with the objective measurement, and that will be it. Now, these two sections actually present a very interesting problem, if you think about it. Oral law has strengths and weaknesses. Written law has strengths and weaknesses. What's the strength of written law? That can't be changed, right? It's handed down, it's there. You're not going to argue it, right? Its weakness is that it's not adaptable. It's not adaptable. You can't interpret it. That's it. Finish, join, tefillin or tefillin. That's it. Nobody's going to talk about it. Oral law has strengths and weaknesses. What's the strength of oral law? That it's adaptable. What's the weakness of oral law? That you may lose it, right? It's not written. Now, these two sections have the weaknesses of oral law and written law, but none of the strengths, if you think about it. These two sections are immutable. They're halacha l'Moshe Sinai, but they're not written down. So you have immutable law that's not written down. Why does HaKadosh Baruch Hu do that? Why doesn't he write down in the text what tefillin should be if nobody's going to argue about it? Why doesn't he tell us what a mezuzah should contain? So there are a variety of different approaches. I'd like to offer three suggestions. The first is that the way I'll put it is that these sections of law, prime the pump of halachic process. You know what priming the pump? In other words, if I want to get water from a pump, first I've got to do it a couple of times. So this is setting the stage for oral law in three ways. Number one, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling you not everything is written down. That the law is much more than will appear in the text. Number two, he is establishing, and this is close to my heart, rabbinic authority, right? He basically is saying that Moshe comes down that mountain. Moshe Rabbeinu, the first rabbi, first Rav, comes down, and he has information that only he has and has to be transmitted, and therefore rabbinic authority will flow from him across the ages. And finally, number three is there has to be a human dimension to the handing down of the law. There has to be the best example I could come up with is something that's a little strange, and that is when I was in fourth grade, fifth grade, I don't remember. I went to my teacher, and I said to my teacher, "Why do only married people have babies?" Right? Which, by the way, isn't true. All right, we know that isn't true, but that was my perception at that time. So the teacher wisely said, "Go ask your parents. That question is something you should ask your parents." So I asked my parents, Aleihem Hashalom. And my mom was an excellent teacher, but they gave me a book to read. And I read the book, and I still didn't understand. But I didn't ask them again, and I learned from my friends, whatever. In other words, there has to be oral explanation for the law to come alive. You can't just read a book and understand the law. So all of and the final dimension, that's the final. So it's number one, not everything is written. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying you should know that there exists law beyond the text. Number two, rabbinic authority. And number three, human ingredient in the handing down of oral law. Next. And by the way, my parents were terrific teachers, but this one was a little uncomfortable for them, I guess. All right, now, number B, category 3. Now, this is all Hebrew. The next page has a summary in English. This is in some ways the most revolutionary and the most important part of oral law, because most of oral law falls into this category. And that is decisions that are made by the rabbis based upon their understanding of Torah law applied to modern circumstances. Genetic engineering. What's the attitude of Jewish law to genetic engineering? What's its attitude to electricity? And in this particular section, you will find debates. You will find differences of opinion. Hillel and Shammai. I have a book in my library, which was given to me by my grandfather when he gave me his library, which was beautiful. And that is that one text which is called Otsar Dinim Uminhagim. It's called a compendium of laws and customs. And in that book is an entry that says telephone. And the entry says most authorities say you can use a telephone on Shabbos. So apparently, at that point, the authorities that this author was looking at basically thought it was allowable. When we found out more about it, rabbinic authority changed the point of view and it became usher. But that's a debate. That's what's happening. One of the most important debates that's happening today, and one of the most saddest and most important, is brain death, correct? The determination of death in Jewish law. Is total brain death considered death, right? In other words, and that's not the usual interpretation of brain death. It's even more. It's no activity even in the brainstem. Or are we going to use the classical definition of death, which is the cessation of breathing? Right? And what is the critical question here? You have someone hooked up to a respirator that cannot breathe on their own, is breathing with the respirator's help, and it's totally brain dead. What can you do? Can you unplug that respirator? And this becomes even more important, not just because we want to know what the family's going to have to go through over the next number of years, but it becomes important when you consider the issue of transplantation, because certain organs can only be transplanted from a body such as that, from a body that's living on some level, but not really living. Now, according to one position, unplugging that respirator is murder. That we go by the technical ritual decision of what it is that marks death. That is a cessation of breathing. This body is breathing, and therefore it has to be left alone. The second position is no, that we have the ability in our day to determine death differently, and this person is only artificially breathing because it's being not helped, but is caused by the respirator, and you can unplug the respirator. Two totally different positions. I believe that the decision is going to be made by the people who are out in the field. In other words, when a rabbi is struck and needs to deal with this, and that, by the way, just like telephone, the determination in the next generation won't be a debate. In other words, I think by then we will have decided, and decided by practice, I think. I believe, and most rabbis, I think, paskin this way on a practical level, that brain death, total brain death, is considered death, and that you can take the organs from such a person and in such a situation. Whether or not I'm right, whether or not that will be the determination, let's leave that for the continued explanation. Now, what's so significant about this section, and what makes it so revolutionary, is that this is the place where God takes divine law and hands it to man. and says it's your job to take this law and to use it as you see fit. Now, wait a minute, hold on a minute. There's a truth up there, right? And the truth is determined by God. How am I able to I'll say one thing, my colleague will say another. Who's right? Who does God agree with? So what happens in the days of the Sanhedrin is that the law will be debated, the vote will take place, and the majority will rule. And that will be acceptable. I'll go even further in a little while. Take a look at page number 4, I believe. Yeah. At the bottom of the page, the famous rabbinic debate between Rabbi Eliezer and his colleagues concerning the Achnai oven. This is often quoted, right? An Achnai oven. An oven is a specific kind of oven that is made of pottery that's put together, shards that are put together. Can you kosher such an oven? And Rabbi Eliezer says no, and the majority says yes. They're sitting in the base medrash. All right, what happens? Rabbi Eliezer is a very strong personality, and he says, I know I'm right, and God's going to prove it. God, if I'm right, I want that tree outside here to start moving. And the tree begins to move. He says, God, if I'm right, I want that stream that's flowing outside the base medrash to flow upstream instead of downstream. And it flows. He says, if I'm right, I want the walls of this base medrash to begin to fall. And the walls begin to lean as if they're going to fall. And he says, okay, guys, I got God on my side, right? Therefore, you're going to decide like me. Along comes, is it Rabbi Yoshua, right? Rabbi Yoshua stands on his feet and says, famous phrase from the Torah, Lo b'shamayim. It's no longer in the heavens. God is given this to us, has told us how we should make decisions and how we should apply. And that being the case, God will agree to anything we come up with if we enter the process with loyalty. If we enter the process going in saying we were going to try to find the objective truth, but whatever we say, whatever decision we make, that will become acceptable. Yes.
What happens when the majority has decided, and it's very clear it's the majority, and that's what they're held by. And then 20 years later, 50 years later, whatever it is, the majority changes.
Okay.
And it
Excellent.
really takes the opposite view.
Excellent question. Can one Bezdin overturn the Bezdin that exists before? All right, we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, let's talk about that, because what happens is we have trouble finding what the majority is. Let me go further. The next section is a section that on page number 5 that underscores what we're saying, and that you and I have looked at before in another context, and that is Rabban Gamliel says that it's Rosh Chodesh and believes the witnesses, and Rabbi Eliezer, I think, right, basically does not accept, and he believes that he establishes that the other position is right, and therefore not only is the day of Rosh Chodesh determined, but what? All the Chagim. Rabban Gamliel says, I'm the Nasi. I am making a rule that you are to appear before me on the day that you think it's Yom Kippur with your purse and your staff. In other words, I want you to desecrate that day because you have to go by me. Rabbi Eliezer goes out and doesn't know what to do. He encounters Rabbi Akiva, he encounters Reb Dosa, and they say to him, look, you've got no choice. You have to obey Rabban Gamliel. If you're going to cast an aspersion on Rabban Gamliel's Bezdin, then you have to cast an aspersion on every Bezdin that existed till now, right? In other words, you can't. This process won't work, and therefore he appeared in front of Rabbi Gamliel with his staff, with his purse, on the Yom Kippur that he thought was Yom Kippur, and Rabbi Gamliel said, Bo v'shalom, we quoted this before, come in peace, Rebbe v'talmidai, my Rav, my teacher and my student, Rebbe b'chachma, you are my teacher in wisdom, but you are my student that you accepted my words. Right? Very beautiful. So what's happened? So therefore, Rabbi Gamliel is saying we decided it in the way we were supposed to. Next, look at the next paragraph. And this is even more, in my mind, even more revolutionary. 3 years, over the course of 3 years, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel had a number of disagreements, famous disagreements. And we didn't know what to do. Do we follow Beis Shammai? Do we follow Beis Hillel? Yatsa Bas Kol V'Amra, a voice from heaven emerged and said, Elu va'elu divrei Elokim chayim. They're both right. They're both right. God sees that each of them has used the law properly, has fashioned an answer based upon their understanding and based upon their wisdom, and that's it. They are both right. Oh, well, God, that's a problem. Is meat kosher or treif? Beis Shammai says treif and Hillel says kosher. How can they both be right? So we have to follow someone. So therefore, why did Beis Hillel emerge as the victor in these debates, if they're both right? Because of outside reasons, because of the way they behaved, the way they treated Beis Shammai. In other words, that determined what the law would be, even though Beis Shammai was right. So the definition of right, this is the revolution. The definition of right is changed when you come to halacha. The definition of right is not an objective right. The definition of right is, were you loyal to the process? Did you do your job? Did you do your best? You reached a position. Take a look at Rabbi Moshe Feinstein's introduction, and I'll take 2 questions in a moment. Once a scholar has properly researched the Talmud, this is Rabbi Feinstein in his introduction to his works. The Talmud and halachic literature with all his ability, with seriousness and the fear of the Holy One, blessed be he, and he arrives at a conclusion which he believes to be correct, then that is psak. That is truth, period, finished. And basically, this is an answer to himself. If you look earlier in the introduction, he basically says, I don't want to do this. This is too much responsibility. Maybe I'm not equipped to come up with God's answer. And he says, no, this is the answer to that. This is that God will accept whatever I come up with, and that lets me move ahead. Yes.
Yeah. So it's interesting that in the previous one it was the Baskol, because before there's not no Bashamayim. So why could not this have been resolved through a majority?
Well, the Baskol. Well, first of all, we don't. Again, this is Midrashic. Was there a Baskol? We don't know, right? Secondly, the Baskol only said Elu va'elu divrei Elokim chayim. They then decided who we were going to follow. That was decided on earth. And that the Baskol was only saying, I want you to know that they're both right. And now go ahead and make your decision. Oh, I forgot to say that. Brilliant. Thank you so much. Right. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. After the event with the Tanur Shel Achnai, where Rabbi Ezer said, I'm right, and tried to proved it by divine will, some Rabbi, I think it was Rabbi Nassan met Eliyahu Hanavi. One of the other Rabbanim. Yeah, one of the other Rabbanim. And he meets Eliyahu Hanavi according to this medrash in the Gemara. And he says to Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Eliyahu Hanavi, please tell me, what did God say when we decided the law against Rebbe Eliezer? What did he say? And Eliyahu answers with a famous answer, Nitzchuni banai nitzchuni. And what is the usual translation of that text is, my children have defeated me, they have defeated me, meaning that's right. But another interpretation was suggested. I heard it in the name of the Vilna Gaon or Rabbi Soloveitchik, so I'm not sure who said it, right? And it's beautiful. This time, it doesn't mean nitzachon. It comes from the word netzach, eternal. My children have made me eternal. And that's what this does. What this does is it allows us to make decisions when it comes to things that, again, genetic engineering and Jewish law. Right? And we're going to, what?
It's the escalator clause.
What's the escalator clause?
The escalator clause is that when you take something and bring it into the time that it belongs.
Oh, okay.
That it's changeable.
It's change, right. Okay, it's changeable, but once you decide, that becomes the decision. Right. Now, in terms of the question that was asked, what if the majority differs in another era? What's rare, it doesn't really happen. In other words, it doesn't really happen, because what happens is the rabbis of one generation basically respect those who came before. Now, the process doesn't work at its best in our time. Why not? Because we don't have a Sanhedrin and we don't take a majority vote. Well, how do you determine your halacha? You go to your rabbi, and your rabbi, if he is able to tell you the answer, will tell you the answer. And if not, he goes to a posek and confers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you'll get different answers from different people. We have existed with that problem since the destruction of the temple. So somehow the process still works, in spite of the fact that we don't have the ability to determine the majority. The process still works with people finding their rabbinic authorities and going by their rabbinic authorities. Yes. What?
I asked, please close the phone.
Oh, please close the phone. Okay.
You said that Eliyahu Navi answered something about Hashem said that the people were.
You have defeated me, or you have made me eternal.
Is that because they remained loyal to?
That's because they remain loyal to a process that could exist over time. In other words, this section basically says, what could have happened is we could have entered Israel and we could have encountered something that wasn't dealt with in the Torah and wasn't dealt with in Moshe Sinai. And we have basically three choices. One choice is to ignore it. Another choice is to say, no, it's an important thing, but it's not dealt with in Jewish law. And the third possibility is everything is dealt with by Jewish law somehow, and we're going to deal with it. And that's what we did. And that's why this becomes eternal, because it becomes usable in every generation.
Many years ago, I went to a Rav. I started asking him a shayla, and he stopped me in the middle. He said, I know you're going to ask me, I'm a machmer. I'll send you to a maker.
That's good. Okay, I'll repeat that. One of our students here went to a Rav many years ago, and I'm repeating it for the Rav said to him, stopped him in the middle of the question and said, I know what you're going to ask. I am machmir. I rule strictly in this. I'll give you the name of someone who's more lenient. All right. That was an interesting Rav. Interesting. All right. So anyway, yes.
I'm going back to the very beginning of your shiur. The two different approaches of taking literally everything that was going to be was revealed to Moshe.
Right.
And looking back over history, you see the tremendous volume of issues that have come up over the eras. One wonders, I know Moshe Rabbeinu was very special. One wonders how he had the capability.
You're basically honing in on why I agree with the Rambam. All right. In other words, you can believe, you can accept. Look, parting of the Red Sea, the Ten Commandments, all of that. It's miraculous. So perhaps miraculously, Moshe was able to receive all of that information and pass it on. Oh, but it didn't. But after a while, it got lost, and then that's why we have Machlokas, etc., etc. I didn't read for you the section in the Rambam where he takes on that point of view. And he says that point of view is absolutely wrong from his perspective and creates serious lack of respect for the rabbis. All right? And he's even stronger than that. And basically he dismisses it and says, I don't agree. All right, next. Yes.
Just want to go back to the original example you brought about. I want to go back to the original example that you brought about the telephone, because when the telephone came out, maybe there was some halacha that you were allowed to use it. And how did that then change?
In the same way that I think brain death will be determined. In other words, after time, the majority of rabbis said no. Right? That's what happened. In other words, it was being debated at that time, and the decision was no. When they learned more about the telephone, when they learned more about its use and what happens, they came up, and you won't find anybody today who says you can use it without unless it's emergency. That is correct. That is correct. The halacha is dependent by the rabbis of the time who determine it. And even though there are differences of opinion among those rabbis, when it comes to overarching issues, they will find agreement. You won't find anybody who says you can use a telephone. You won't find anybody who disagrees about how we interpret the laws of Shabbos. But you will find other machlokas. You will find other debates.
Yes, so about this, I heard that Rabbi Oizer, I think it was, made Havdalah on an incandescent lamp to make sure that people know, because there were people at that time who thought that you can use electricity on Shabbos. And he wanted to show them this is fire, just like a candle.
Right, interesting. All right, Chaim Ozer, according to her, made Havdalah on an incandescent lamp to show that he didn't use it on Shabbos, he only used it after Shabbos, to prove or to testify that you cannot use, and right, okay, yes. You have to ask your posek. Yes.
So, for example, when I was growing up, we always opened and closed the refrigerator on Shabbos. Then I went to Gateshead and I found that people don't open and close the refrigerator because supposedly the motor starts or doesn't stop. And
not even the light.
We're talking about the motor in the refrigerator. Before I was brought up where
there are differences. There are differences of opinion on that, and differences of opinion based on what kind of refrigerator it is and what its mechanisms are. And the answer is you have to ask and find the posek that you feel. Unlike that story, you're not allowed to shop. In other words, what do I mean? This rabbi is lenient when it comes to refrigerators. This rabbi's lenient. This other rabbi's lenient when it comes to the second day of Yontif in Israel. This rabbi's, and then I'll go to all the lenient rabbis. So you can't do that. You have to have your authority, and you have to take him for better or for worse. Yes, and I don't mean better or worse, for strict or not. Yes.
I think I remember that Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach.
Yes.
That he wrote, I think, an entire paper, I don't know the right word, on electricity, and he actually proved why you could use electricity, and then the rabbis above him, a couple of them said, no, it might be right, but we're not going to.
Okay, so I can't comment on that because I don't know the facts. In other words, I don't know what Rav Shlomo Auerbach wrote, and I don't know who disagreed, so I can't talk about that. But this is,
Like, put
I understand. All right, yes, last comment,
What
because
about,
we have
for
to go on.
example, where I was brought up where I was told if it's for food, you can open it on Shabbos. And then I went to Gateshead and they said that if you want to open a bottle, you need to poke a hole in the cover of the bottle. So
Difference.
am I permitted to simply say
Difference.
this is the most absurd thing I've ever heard?
No.
Because
No, you're not. I'll tell you what. What I do is I happen to open with most caps that are sold. But if the cap is on the wine, that cap was put on not by two pieces. That cap was put on sort of on the bottle. That my son taught me. I poke a hole in that, and then so it's not totally ridiculous. All right, but there are some opinions that say you don't have to. I would assume. All right, that will again, right, live and learn. Right, okay. No, let's go on. Okay. I've got 10 minutes, and I have a lot to cover. All right, please. 10 minutes and a lot to cover. All right, number four. What is and number 4 and 5 are similar but vastly different. They are, no, page 6. All right, is that right? No, page 5. 6, C and D. All right. These two sections are similar but vastly different at the same time. They are similar because these are sections of laws that the rabbis mandate, not on the basis of their understanding of Torah law, but mandate because they want to mandate it. Now, what do I mean? The first section is called Gezerot. Gezerot are, according to the rabbis, Gedorim, fences around the law. For example, Muksa. Muksa is a fence around the laws of Shabbos. It was created by the rabbis. You don't find it in the Torah. You don't find it. God didn't say the things are Muksa. The rabbis determined that if people were going to be able to move certain objects on Shabbos that they shouldn't use, or had not set aside for Shabbos use, they might come to carry them, they might come to use them, we're going to make them muksa. And they did that on the basis of their understanding of the communities with which they were dealing. And Gezerot are basically only until the end of close to the end of the Talmud, a little bit more. In other words, we don't have Gezerot today. We have the next section. All right, so Gezerot exist, they are uniformly accepted, and they are supposed to be accepted by the total community. Right, so therefore you have, yes, I just did, Muksa. Muksa is a Gezerah, all right? Muksa is a Gezerah. What? I'm sorry. You can't marry. Oh, no, that's not a Gezerah. Now, I'll get to that in a minute. You can't marry two wives. All right. So, a Gezerah is a law that is surrounding and protecting the Torah law, like Muksa, like what's forbidden in the Torah concerning meat and milk? What's forbidden, according to the Torah, are three things: cooking it, eating a cooked mixture, gaining satisfaction from a cooked mixture, selling it. I could, according to Torah law, sit down at the table with my steak and wash it down with milk. According to Torah law. In other words, the Torah law does not prohibit the eating of non-cooked together milk and meat. Along come the rabbis and they say, wait a minute, this isn't going to work, right? We have to create fences, because if people are going to be able to eat it in that fashion, they're going to eat it in the prohibited fashion. And we understand human nature, we understand our communities, we need to make that gezerah, agreed upon by all the rabbis, total acceptance in the community. Now, that's gezerot. takanot, which is the last section, is even more revolutionary. Takanot gives the rabbis the authority to mandate laws that are not connected necessarily to Torah law, but because they see that these laws have to be mandated because of situations or communities. For example, Rabbeinu Gershom was a authority in the Middle Ages. Numerous takanot. One of the most famous was just spoken of before. You can't marry more than one wife. Right? That we banning polygamy in Jewish law. Now, takanot are for a particular time and for a particular place, and can be limited. A rabbi in his community can make a takana, and I'll tell you what one was in a minute. But the takanot of Rabbeinu Gershom, he was the authority for all of Ashkenazic Jewry. So therefore, Ashkenazim stopped polygamy at that point. Sephardim did not hold by Rabbeinu Gershom. They had their own authority. And their authority never made the takana that you can't have more than one wife, which is why Sephardim continued to, in some cases, have polygamy. And some Sephardim who came to Israel came with two wives because that was the accepted practice. They eventually accepted the Ashkenazic practice in this case, and I guess it's also secular law. Yeah, probably. Yeah. In other words, it now it's universally. What? The second one could be second wife could be muksa. Okay, good. All right. So now I'll give you another example. I'll take your question in a moment. I'll give you another example. I was rabbi in Potomac, Maryland before I was rabbi in Englewood, New Jersey. There was a law on the books in Washington, which was a takana. It was a takana that was used by numerous communities in Europe. It was called basar chutz, outside meat. And what was this takana? We were just building up the Washington community. There was a butcher. The rabbis wanted the butcher to succeed, but guess what? He was charging more and had to charge more because of his expenses than the butcher in Baltimore. So what were all the Jews doing? Going to Baltimore, right? Along come the rabbis say, that's not going to work. If we want to have a community, we have to have a butcher in the community. We're making a rule that outside meat cannot be brought into Washington, and cannot be consumed in Washington. And now the problem is they're making a monopoly for that butcher, right? So what then do? They have to go to the butcher and they have to mandate to him that he has to be reasonable in what it is he's charging. But these are takanot. One of the earliest takanot is one that is part of our lives today, and that is the takana found in the Mishnah, Ein podin shvuyim yeser al kedei demehem. All right, what does it mean? You don't redeem captives literally for more than they're worth. Now, wait a minute. Oh, well, more than they're worth. A person is the whole world, the rabbis say. How do you determine the worth of a person? And so, therefore, what do they do? What is the reason for this takana? Because pidyon shvuyim is one of the most important rules in the Torah. They're limiting that rule because they knew that if they kept giving and giving more and more, two things would happen. They would bankrupt the community, and they would also what? They would also encourage additional hostage taking. So that's why. So that was a takana. Now, how they applied the takana and how we should apply the takana today, I don't have an answer for that because what?
The government is not applying it today.
Well,
they're making one person worth 67
Well, yes and no. I mean, if I were part of the family of that one person, I don't know what I'd say. All right, yeah, but that's an opinion. But it's a valid opinion because of that takana. It's a valid opinion because that takana exists, and how you determine what is the worth or the value of that hostage determines whether or not you can. Now, I want to take you to one last paragraph, and then I'll take any questions. The last paragraph is as following. Look in the last, actually two points. Look at the page number 6 and 7. No, 7. So page number 7 is what do I mean by the result? There is a famous medrash in the Talmud. Again, you don't have to believe it in terms of, you can say it happened, or you can say it's teaching me something. What is it, the medrash? The medrash is Moshe Rabbeinu was going up Har Sinai to get the Torah. This is appropriate for us, right? We're coming to Parshas Yisro. And when he goes up to get the Torah, what does he find? He finds God tying the crowns onto specific letters of the Torah. Right? In other words, and you look at the Torah scroll, certain letters of crowns. He turns to Hashem and says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, give us the no frills edition, please. All right, we're waiting. We can't wait for this. To which HaKadosh Baruch Hu responds, no, I'm going to put the crowns on because someday in your people will be a great scholar who is going to determine the meaning of the crowns and why they are on those letters. And his name is Rabbi Akiva. So Moshe says, oh, wow, I'd like to meet him. HaKadosh Baruch Hu transforms Moshe in time, takes him in time to the time of Rabbi Akiva. He is sitting in Rabbi Akiva's yeshiva in one of the last rows, and he's getting more and more upset because he doesn't understand a word. He doesn't know what, that's not what I'm getting at Sinai. Until one student raises his hand and says what? Says, that law, Rabbi Akiva says, comes from this law, which comes from this law, which comes from this law, and this was given to Halacha L'Moshe Sinai. That we accept. The rabbis recognized that the law will look vastly different in every generation because of the challenges that will be faced by the law. But the mechanisms to determine that are built into the text, are built in, and because of that, we have existed for the centuries. This is what has kept us together. I'll tell you, the personal note is actually a section that I have in my book on Shmuel, but I'll tell you the story. I was creating a boundary for an Erev, a wall. And how was I doing it? I was doing it by you have uprights and horizontals. You create a series of doorposts. And what we used to do, now they run it up the whole wall. What we used to do is put a piece of wood at the bottom, and there's a law that if you take the wood straight up and it intersects with the horizontal, that's good enough as long as the wood is of enough size. Fine. Problem is enough size. The problem is the telephone poles are never straight. They lean. And here I was putting up a piece of wood on a leaning telephone pole, and I didn't know what to do. If I put it here, it was going to end up in outer space. If I put it here, it was going to end up in the middle of the pole. So I worked on it for 45 minutes. The congregant who was with me and helping me in this endeavor turned to me afterwards and said, Rabbi, do you really believe God cares whether or not that piece of wood is under that particular wire? That you spend 45 minutes of your life doing that. And automatically I answered with an answer that to me defines how I view this whole process. I said, I don't believe God cares. I believe that God cares that we care. And what I mean by that is what he wants from us is to be loyal to the process and to consider it valuable and to recognize its strength and to realize that it's kept us alive for centuries. Okay, thank you very much.